What's up, everyone? Welcome back to TMH Sportscast. I'm Zach Cohen, Liam Hickey with me. Approaching week 4 of the football season, Miami had an amazing win against USF last week. Liam, give me your thoughts about last week's game against USF.
Yeah, the Hurricanes may as well have been the Matadors the way they are taming the South Florida Bulls, putting some belt to behind from start to finish, really. They ended South Florida's Fantasyland Cinderella run in a brutal fashion, winning 49 to 12. It was Miami's biggest victory margin over a ranked opponent since beating Washington 65 to 7 in the 2001 year, where of course they won the national championship and were considered one of the best college football teams of all time. And it was also not a great game historically for USF, who were denied the chance at a third straight ranked win to start the season after victories over, of course, Boise State and Florida. And that would have tied them with, of course, the Miami 1987 team, who were the last team to do that. So, incredible win for Miami, who really were going into the game as the villain. And they definitely played that role, just absolutely bulldozing through the South Florida team that looks like they were in another FCS opponent for us.
Well, it seems like Miami's being involved with history every week, whether it's Carson Beck making his first 15 passes against Bethune-Cookman or, what they did against USF this week. It seems like Miami has a historical number or some part of history attached to them. And they took care of business. Like you said, they didn't make USF look like a ranked team. They held Byrum Brown to 2 yards rushing. That really eliminated everything. Byrum Brown couldn't go down the field. Again, there's a lot of check down passes. And yeah, I mean, they played good sound ball.
Yeah, I mean, they really just destroyed all the narratives. Cristobal after the game said, our guys didn't want to be part of the narrative of somebody else's success, stepping stone kind of season. So you could tell that all that hype towards USF, where everyone wanted them to win so they could maybe be considered as like a top five team in college football with their resume, it was really rubbing these guys the wrong way. And also, don't let it be forgotten that this was sold as a duel between two early Heisman contenders. And it's now, after this game, eminently clear that only one still remains in those discussions, and that's, of course, Carson Beck, who once again shined in this game under the rain after that like 2 hour lightning delay that me and you were both there for. And while Brown was bottled up by a different kind of storm, Hurricane Bannon Company, Beck was the one that really showed out. He outran Byrum Brown on the night and just was absolutely dominant in the air raid, especially to Joshua Moore.
Yeah, that's something we don't see a lot from Beck. Him, or at least in the first 2 games, him running out of the pocket, scrambling. But he was very effective, and that comes with a good offensive line, giving him room to run. And we saw him go to the outside. We saw him cut through that A gap in the middle of the field. And 28 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown. It was really a good day for Beck. And I know you mentioned Josh Moore. It seems like Carson Beck unlocks a new target every week. Week 1 and 2, CJ Daniels, Malachi Tony. But you had Josh Moore score 2 touchdowns, first two of his collegiate career. Keelan Marion over 80 yards receiving. You had 5 guys with over 50 receiving yards for Miami, and Beck's doing a phenomenal job of throwing the football around.
And let's give some flowers to the defense here, who also just absolutely tormented Byrum Brown all night. On the total for his game, he had just 2 yards and 13 carries. Meanwhile, Beck had 28 yards and a rush touchdown. And just looking at it from a national perspective, there are not many defenses that are better right now. They are, this is the second straight week for Miami where they are 80 plus in both offensive and defensive PFF grades, where they had a 90.5 offensive grade, which is the same versus BCU. But once again, such a high level step up there between BCU and South Florida, and they're still executing day in and day out. And then an 80.4 grade on defense. I mean, just an elite pass rushing and run defending unit that this team has on that back seven, or the front seven rather. And the secondary is once again showing out as well. Bryce Fitzgerald had an interception that was huge. It led to a touchdown where Carson Beck punched it in right afterwards. So just big play after big play is being made by both groups. And it's leading to this resounding success that's now getting all this national attention.
And yeah, I mean, talk about the defense. Bryce Fitzgerald with that interception, like you mentioned, and you know, we still go back to Akeem Mesidor and Ruben Bain week after week. I mean, Akeem Mesidor 6 tackles, half a sack, and one of those half the tackle for a loss, and Ruben Bain who continues to be a superstar. And we even got to see some of that depth come in from that defensive side late in the game. It doesn't matter who's in the game; they're gonna get the job done. And I want to go back to the offensive side for a second. Mark Fletcher Jr. was a superstar. He couldn't get tackled. 120 yards, two touchdowns, a big touchdown run in that second quarter that really set Miami apart from USF.
Fletcher had another monster night and was arguably Miami's most dominant player once again in back-to-back games. And I think after Saturday night, he has firmly asserted himself now as the team's lead back. He had 16 carries, 120 yards, two touchdowns, including a 38-yard dynamic run that came at the perfect time, really, because it was right after USF's field goal following the rain delay. And it really looked like the switch had flipped and USF was now on the front foot. That totally took all of the air out of that balloon for USF. The momentum had flipped once again after that touchdown towards Miami, and they were just able to flip it on cruise control for the rest of the night. And USF never stood a chance, mainly because it could all be drawn back to him and that those explosive plays.
Yeah, success all around. And obviously, with the positives, there's some things that any football team has to work on for the next week and improve. And we saw that flags were an issue. Liam, do you want to talk about what you saw with the issues with the flags, in that game?
Flags were not great. It reminded me of how Florida struggled against USF in week two, where they had 11 penalties for over 100 yards of free total offense for Byrum Brown and company. In this game, it was close to that number. Miami had nine penalties for about 69 yards, I believe. Um, and that's something that really just needs to be worked on in the week leading up to this game versus Florida, which is going to be all important for the coaching staff. And I have the utmost faith in defensive coordinator Corey Heatherman and the leadership of Coach Mario Cristobal that they'll be able to adjust on the fly and really make these changes. I mean, we've seen it before how well this team is and this coaching staff is in preparing and making sure that these issues are shored up from week to week to make sure that they're not repeated again. Examples of this are when reports came out recently after the USF game that Cristobal had practiced for a rain delay, and that was in the Sunday scrimmage at Hard Rock all the way back before Notre Dame. He actually implemented a schedule break in the middle of practice to get players familiar with what they needed to eat and refuel to stay energized. And then, of course, that came in handy 3 weeks later when a lightning delay kept the players off the field for, I believe it was an hour and 42 minutes, for being exact, at the beginning of the second quarter. And then another example would be when CJ Carr's design QB draws were really affecting this defensive unit. And that was not an issue whatsoever with Byrum Brown, who was arguably a better runner than CJ Carr, bottled up for 2 yards over 13 carries on the night. So I believe with all those factors being considered, Heatherman and Cristobal will make it their first priority to correct these penalty mistakes we saw, and we will never see or hear about them again. And I believe it'll be Florida that'll be the undisciplined ones under head coach Billy Napier and staff who really have the hot seat right now.
Well, I mean, Liam, you mentioned the rain delay. And it's kind of funny, bringing it back to last year during Parents Week when we played Ball State. There was a 3 hour rain delay. It was a 4:30 kick. So, playing football, South Florida, 4:30 p.m. on in September. Maybe that's a scheduling thing that they'll fix for next year. And we'll get another 7:30 game, 7:30 game in that time slot. And hopefully they'll avoid the rain delay this week. But yeah, I was sitting in that Cristobal press conference after the game, and he tipped his cap to sports science and nutrition department. I mean, really getting advanced in all levels, of that science, the sports science field of to make sure keep the players healthy. And they really came out like it was the start of the game, like they had a lot of energy despite the break. And I want to point it out to some other news, even that happened during the game. CJ Daniels did come down for a minute after making a catch. It was a hard fall. He got knocked down pretty hard. We haven't really heard much about that this week, but I think we'll be fine. The big news is what we heard. JoJo Traders is expected to make his start this weekend against the Gators. Cristobal said he'll be a full go, and that comes to him after he just missed the cut to play last week, which many did think he was gonna play. Any other news we should look at as they head into this week?
aside from the addition of JoJo Trader, which will definitely be a big help against Miami. They're also going to get back Jordan Lyle. At least we think he could. He was held out against USF just barely due to limited work throughout the week leading up to that game. Cristobal said he was ready at game time, but he was actually held out due to game situations, whatever that means. Miami, as we know, has been notoriously cryptic when it comes to player injuries, and we hope that these players will see action soon because they will be key cogs in this offense if they do play. Just imagine we already have so much dynamism coming from CJ Daniels, Joshua Moore now, and Malachi Tony as our top three. Imagine what JoJo Trader can do now to really just tear this defensive secondary apart from Florida if he's added into that mix. That would be scary to see. But if we can go back now and talk about Carson Beck, another player that was completely unfazed by this lightning delay because, oh my gosh, he may be the number one Heisman contender right now after week three.
I mean, Carson Beck, it was just unbelievable what we've been seeing. See him continue to do the same type of, things he did in the first 3 weeks, and do even better against Florida. I mean, that's the ultimate goal. We saw Shannon Dawson really open up that playbook against USF, and th that got them rolling.
And he's absolutely lethal when he has time in the pocket, which has been almost always due to just how good this offensive line is. In a clean pocket, he's 23 for 24 with an 84.9 PFF passing grade. He had three touchdowns and, of course, two big downfield throws for large chunks of yardage to both Keelan Marion and CJ Daniels. Um, an incredible, shocking stat here is that he was actually only pressured 5 times overall. And in the last 3 games, only 11 times. That is the lowest pressure rate of any quarterback in the country. And that spells disaster looking ahead for this Florida team who has an absolutely abysmal defensive line right now and is really struggling with getting any pressure on the quarterback. So I feel that heading into that game, Beck is just going to light up that secondary because he's going to have so much time to throw. And he really does look like the best quarterback in the country when he doesn't have pressure that he's got to scramble out of.
Oh, high praise for Carson Beck. And with that, gonna end this first segment here. But when we come back, we'll have Max Bernstein from the Independent Alligator football reporter for them in just a few minutes. Thank you, and we'll be back soon. What's good, everyone? Welcome back to the TMH Sportscast. We have a very special guest for this segment. We want to welcome Max Bernstein, a third-year sports journalism major at the University of Florida, who who works for the Independent Alligator, currently University of Florida's student newspaper. Max, welcome on.
Thank you guys. Excited to be here, repping the alligator and the UF community. So thank you.
What's like the pulse around the fan base now, given that tough loss, and what's kind of the state of Florida football, you think?
The morale is below the ground. If there's a underworld for morale, it is where the Florida football community is right now and how they feel about this team. It's starting to feel like it's just a matter of when, not if, on Billy Napier's time here and when that's going to end. Um, Obviously, no one has those answers, but that's what the fans are feeling. From a media perspective, it's very interesting right now. It's very unpredictable. They're really keeping a lot of things close to the chest, as you can imagine. So very different situation from how you guys are feeling, probably. Yeah.
Yeah, so last game for you guys was against LSU, and it did not go the way you guys wanted, and it definitely put Napier back on that hot seat that he already probably was on after that loss to South Florida. So do you think people are overreacting to that loss? Because, Lagway with 5 interceptions, do you think that was like an anomaly for his performance, or was it just like a microcosm of everything that's gone wrong with this program and the major prevalent issues surrounding it with Napier and the rest of the coaching staff?
Yeah. I mean, the loss wasn't really unexpected. LSU is a really good team. It's one of the hardest places to play in Death Valley, but when you only give up, 13 points to them on defense, that's a game you have a chance to win. Lagway missed a ton of time this offseason. I know that was talked about a lot. His mechanics look completely off. Footwork wise, mechanically, just top to bottom, there's something off with his play. And now his confidence, a lot of Florida fans really wanted him to get pulled last game to kind of have him settle down. So he looked like that in the USF game too. There were some throws that, he should have made that could have been touchdowns that could have put the Gators ahead in that game. So definitely frustrating. I mean, especially with the expectations for him going into the season. And, the team's performance as a whole offensively on the play calling front has been, under par and has received a lot of criticism. So when a defense plays like that against one of the best teams in the country, you should have a chance to win. And it just never seemed like UF was in position to win that game.
Yeah, I mean, Lagway making some errant throws, and I see like the running backs numbers, they're not really getting above 50 yards. I know your number one running back last week had like less than 50 yards. What do you think they need to do to kind of get the offense more going on the running side of things?
Jaden Ball has been very effective when he's had the ball in his hands, especially over the first 2 weeks of the season. They were trying to get him more involved in the pass game against LSU, which was working to an extent. But when you have a running back who's running for 6 yards per carry on the season and has been your best offensive player, going out of your way to not give him the ball is not a good strategy on offense. They are running bubble screens on every play. They are running, they're putting Hayden Hansen out wide, our 6'7" tight end who runs a 5 second 40-yard dash. There's just everything is out of whack offensively. The offensive line is a talented unit and has the ability to block for the run game. It's just they're not using the run game at effective times. They love to do it on the first drive, and then they kind of forget that the run game exists.
And like you said, yeah, Jaden Ball has been definitely an alleviator for this offense. I mean, he's averaged like 6.6 yards per carry. He's been almost as effective as Mark Fletcher for Miami, just taking that pressure off Lagway. So, in your opinion, heading into this game, who do you think will be the more explosive positional group? Do you think it'll be the running backs because they will be forced to go against this formidable defensive line unit from Miami? Or do you think it'll be the wide receivers who could be given some looks down the field? As we know, Lagway loves to throw that ball deep. But once again, it's that D line. But we'll see how well the O line can hold up against this D line. It'll definitely be a premier matchup there. So who do you think will be the difference maker though? Wide receivers with Sturdivant and Wilson and Aiden Mizell or Jaden Ball?
Yeah, I think the receiving game, that's where they're going to try and go to. Obviously, we've seen that over the last couple of weeks that they don't want to rely on running the ball, even if that is being more effective. These receivers are getting open. They are getting open, especially in the LSU game. Byrum Brown, the third, the freshman, has been the best receiver on the team this season. He's consistently making plays. J. Mike is a guy that they brought in to really be an alpha in the room. We've really yet to see that happen yet. But Aiden Mizell also, he only played 9 snaps in the LSU game and was extremely effective in those snaps. He made his season debut against USF, made some great catches too. He's been the guy on third down, especially going up against the Miami pass rush, which is one of the best units in the country, regardless of position. That pass rush with Ruben Bain and the rest of those guys. I mean, you need to get the ball out quick. These receivers have the ability to get open. So that's something they're going to be relying on a lot, probably, especially early in the game to try and set a tempo.
And you look at this game, but you also look at the rest of the season. You guys have Florida has a hard schedule. What's your outlook on the season, and how much does that depend on this week 4 matchup against Miami?
Yeah, that USF game really was a game they had to win. Not winning that game, not being 2-0 going into this 4 game stretch really was not the expectation for this program. It was not what they wanted to do. They pigeonholed themselves. And now it's not going to get easier. Every single game that they have left, they might be underdogs in outside of Kentucky. They legitimately might be, maybe Mississippi State, but they will be underdogs in every other game. That is not the position they want to be in. I mean, this was a team that had playoff aspirations. It's looking like, it's on track right now to be Napier's, third losing season in 4 years here. And I I don't have to say that, that hasn't bode well for other coaches in other programs, especially not one that wants to be contending every year.
It's no question that Florida has a gauntlet of a schedule, arguably the hardest in the country. I mean, you look at it and It's not ridiculous to say that this could be a 3-win team this season. I mean, Mississippi State and Kentucky could be their only realistic wins. Everyone else is ranked in the top 25 so far. But if on the flip side, is there maybe a silver lining for Florida fans in that it could lead to Billy Napier getting the hatchet sooner? Do they want him to lose these games so that they can get someone else out there quickly enough?
I'll tell you, these fans do not want to lose. They hate losing. I mean, as much as they might want a coaching change, the last thing they want right now is for this to be an FSU situation from last year. I mean, you don't want to know the time. I heard it reporting on these games, being around campus, like the amount of smack that people were talking about Florida State last year. I mean, that's the type of smack that's going to get talked about us if you win 2, 3 games on a season where you're supposed to contend. I mean, that's not a position you want to be in as a fan. Um, Obviously, like I said, it's starting for a lot of fans. They feel like it's when, not if, at this point. So, I mean, are they going to fire him before they have a guy ready to go? I mean, because the coaching landscape right now, there's a lot of question marks, a lot of guys who would be hot candidates or coaching at, their school they went to, the school they love, if you're talking about Georgia Tech or Arizona State. So, there's definitely a lot of uncertainty. Um, I think depending on how this game goes, I mean, we're going into a bye week next week. There will be a lot of questions, especially with this being game day and nationally televised and the 7:30 slot. If Florida comes out flat, if the play calling is rough, if Lagway looks rough, I wouldn't say there's a 0% chance that there's a change in the next. Obviously, that's not based on any sourcing or anything like that, but that is a feeling. And then obviously, if not, Texas, Texas A&M, Georgia are three of the next 4 games. So, got to win one of those if he wants to give it a shot.
And then
Well,
from what you've seen with the players inside the facility at Hefner Training Center, it's already clear that Napier's already fallen out with the fan base, and it's a relationship that can't be resurrected at this point. But does it seem like the players are still rallying behind him in Gainesville, or do they also want out now?
I mean, from all indications and everything they've said, they're supporting him. They're supporting the team. They're supporting Lagway. This is a tight knit group. It really is. I mean, you could say what you want about Napier's coaching style, and people have made those opinions clear, and we've made those opinions clear at the Alligator on how things have gone. Um, he is a guy who is very well respected by his team as a man and someone who is always, presented himself in a good way. The players, they haven't really made any negative opinions clear. Obviously, there's been some past Florida players who have made some comments on social media. Um, you know, the, you know, the verification of that. I mean, there's no way to really know. Um, it's a situation that will be very interesting because going into this season, there was kind of a feeling that if Napier went, so would Lagway. Um, I think some Gators fans now aren't as worried about the second part of that as they were at the beginning of the season, which would have been a reason they would have wanted Napier to be around. There's a big fan base of Terrell Jones Jr., the freshman down here. People were very happy with what they saw in game one. It'll be very interesting. Obviously, if there's a coaching change now, after the first 4 games, that gives guys the opportunity to redshirt and enter the portal. They have a month to do that. So, I mean, that might be a reason why there isn't a change. There's really no indicator on that. So it's a very interesting situation. Again, very different situation from what Miami is going through. I mean, Miami is a team that, on all accounts, this is a team that should make the playoff and has a legitimate chance to win. Should win double-digit games. Has a legitimate chance. I mean, as good as Miami was last year, I think this is a better team. I think, as good as Cam Ward was, the team around him, the defense is just on another level from last year. I just think, and after last week, USF is not a pushover. I mean, they're really not. Uh, Miami did their best to make them look that way, and that was something Florida had no way of finding out how to do. Very
Well,
interesting.
it's geared to be an interesting month for Florida football as we see what they do in the next few weeks. But before we go, we got to get a score prediction. What are your thoughts on the score of the game?
Oh, you putting me between a rock and a hard place. With how everything's going and how both of these teams are trending right now, um, Miami is really firing on all cylinders on both sides of the ball. This is a rivalry game. I think after last year, I mean, Florida's going to want revenge. What happened last year was, that was an embarrassment for this team and this program. I mean, that was kind of the start of this whole discourse in a way,
Mhm.
where people were really starting to call for Billy's head. Um, I'm thinking 34-20 Miami. If I just had to throw something out there, that's not based on any stats or anything like that. I just think we're talking about a good offense. I think Florida has the opportunity to put points on the board in this game. I think it'll be a high paced game. These are two teams that can move very quickly if that's a game they want to play. It's a different style of play in the ACC as it is in the SEC. But, you know, it's going to be a very different game than what Florida played against LSU, I think. A lot faster pace, probably a little less chippy, actually, which is weird because it is a rivalry game, but this is not as much of a chippy rivalry as it is just like they just don't like each other rivalry. So it should be an interesting game. I mean, crazier things have happened. Um, if Florida were to win this game, I think the best thing that fans can hope for right now is they show some form of life going down the stretch, midway through the stretch, because like we've talked about, it's really not going to get easier.
Hard Rock should be bumping on Saturday night, 7:30 p.m. Max, we want to thank you for your time and your valuable insights into the Florida football team. Thank you.
Thank you,
Appreciate
back.
it, guys.
Appreciate you guys coming on.
Liam, that was a great conversation with Max from the Independent Alligator. And based on what he said, Liam, and what you could expect, what do you think's gonna happen this weekend?
Well, look, Miami has garnered the country's attention as a force to be reckoned with on a national scale. From what Max was saying, Florida really is not the team that everyone's looking at. And now Miami must prove it under center stage and under the microscope of really the entire college football world. As, of course, as we know now, ESPN's College Game Day is coming to town. And it's going to be playing against a do or die Florida Gators team with their backs against the proverbial wall and a coach and QB that really have nothing to lose at this point, as the fan base is totally against them now. Even all the guys down there at Gator Country are calling for Jamel Jones, which I think is really surprising. I would still be sticking with the talent that Ladway offers, but that's besides the point. In Miami this year, really they've thrived this season as the villain, the proverbial thorn in the flesh, and the team that everyone is rooting against. But that's just not going to be the case this game because I believe that the overlying narrative is going to be in favor of the Hurricanes. I think that people want Miami to win. They want to see Billy Napier and the staff self implode and really make a mockery of themselves in prime time, which is why they're rooting for Miami. So it's going to be important that they can find this anger, this natural adversity, that fire in their gut to go out and find something to get mad about when everyone wants them to win and do well.
Well, this game's under the national spotlight, being the 7:30 kickoff in ABC College Game Day and ACC Huddle coming to town, which should be an amazing Saturday here on University of Miami campus. Highly recommend everybody to show out if they can. And for Miami, this is their fourth home game in a row, and the home fans have showed up. The players have made it clear how much the fans matter. Coach Cristobal has made it clear that the fans make a difference. And I think it's going to be too much for the Florida team that's already struggling and has a divided locker room. And you look back to the LSU game, it's a tradition for many college football teams to stay out for the alma mater before they go into the locker room. And Florida didn't, and they went right into the locker room. Maybe it's going to show that they're going to fix some things, but it's going to be a test for Florida, and they have a lot to prove as they play Miami or Hard Rock Stadium.
It surely will be. And this team is not known to be very disciplined. We just saw in the USF game, defensive lineman Brendan Bett spit on a player, which resulted in a critical ejection that really cost Florida at the end of that game. And then also just recently, the Florida just got their running backs coach suspended after an altercation with LSU pregame, and it really just speaks to how that's an issue that lies with the guys in the front management, the top guys, and the hierarchy of the coaches, and that's something that Billy Napier's not going to be happy about, and something that he's not done well to really instill this discipline and this nature of like unity and galvanization in his crew, and that's why they're kind of collapsing like we're seeing now. But you're speaking of tests for Florida. If we're talking about tests for Miami, it's really the secondary that's facing the biggest one because it's time to see now how much they've really improved since last year and if they are legitimately a good unit. It was the D line that really rose to the occasion against Notre Dame, against that top of the line backfield and Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love. But now it's going to be the secondary that really is going to be put under heavy pressure going against Vernell Brown, J. Michael Sturdivant, Dallas Wilson, and Mizell against a quarterback with a completely different profile that we've seen from the other three quarterbacks that Miami has gone against so far. Because DJ Lagway, unlike CJ Carr, unlike Byrum Brown, he loves to toss that football. And so it's going to be putting these guys like Keontae Scott, Zechariah Poyser, Xavier Lucas, OJ Frederic under some real pressure. And we'll see how it plays out.
And you mentioned those guys in the secondary, and we'll see how much Bryce Fitzgerald also plays. It is a freshman, but he's come up big in the first few games of the season, like we mentioned. And in terms of DJ Lagway, you said he likes to throw the ball down the field, but he was very arrogant with his passes. 5 interceptions is inexcusable for any quarterback. Doesn't matter what level you're really playing at, especially SEC school, playing an SEC opponent like LSU. He'll have to be tight with that football. And, that'll also depend how Miami secondary plays and how good their coverage is.
And what's even more concerning if we're talking about DJ Lagway was that most of those interceptions came from a completely clean pocket. His offensive line has been one of the best in the country. I think they rank actually among one of the top ones in all the Power Four teams. And yet he still struggled. He created seven turnover worthy pass attempts in that game against in the season, and six of those came just against LSU. Four out of five of those interceptions were passes right down the middle in his clear line of vision that were in a double, triple coverage. And they weren't really had any chance of connecting with the receiver. Only one of them really was one that you could maybe give him the pass for. So that's really definitely a troubling thing if you're a Florida Gators fan. Can DJ Lagway really be this guy and be the guy that they saw as the emergence at the tail end of last year, where he led that team on to that win streak and really saved Billy Napier's job?
Yeah, a turnover. I mean, a new start for Florida and a winning start could happen this weekend. And this game is gonna, prove. It's gonna really see where their trajectory is for the end of the year, where they'll shape up in the next few weeks. But if you look at last season, Liam, week one, Miami goes to Gainesville in the swamp to play the Gators and beat them 41-17. Cam Ward, incredible. Elijah Royal, Isaiah Horton, and Restrepo all had great plays. And Coach Cristobal and crew and the players really made a statement to all the scouts saying, come like pretty much saying, come to Miami. We run Florida. With that win, why go to Florida when they're having a hard time per se, winning games and the culture maybe isn't strong enough.
Yeah, come to the U. That's what they were screaming to those uh, recruits that Florida was hosting on that official visit to Ben Hill Griffin Stadium when when Miami put Belta behind 41-17. That was the genesis of Cam Ward. But no, the recruiting implications are certainly massive heading into this game because if Miami can manage to curb stomp Florida in back-to-back years, the outcomes could send shockwaves through the state of Florida and almost guarantee that Miami becomes the premier destination for top prospects here in the Sunshine State. Florida's hoping that history doesn't repeat itself, and I believe that a blowout could really set this Gators program back years over their in-state rivals in terms of recruiting. I mean, Cristobal, he said it best himself after they beat Florida State a few games after in the 2024 season. He said, all recruits, in-state, out-of-state, can now clearly see the trajectory of this program versus the trajectory of other programs. And he was, of course, referring to teams more so in the Florida area. And this has only been amplified as we've been receiving recent news in the past day or so that Miami is going to be hosting some top of the line prospects, especially in the class of 2027. And it's something definitely to look out for because if they can manage to really impress these guys, I mean, this program is going to be miles ahead of any other program in the state of Florida for years to come. Some of these guys, one of them is a five-star edge rusher that's currently an Oregon commit, but Miami's looking to flip, and Anthony Jones. He'll be at Hard Rock on Saturday. And then inside the use, Gabby Rudia later provided an update later that after that announcement came out from Steve Wiltfong of On3, saying that on top of this, Miami will also be hosting 11 of the top 20 receivers in the 2027 class this weekend, including the top four in the country of Jameer Brown, Monshin Sales, Easton Royal, and then Nick Lanier, who's already committed to Miami. So this could be a monumental day for Miami and its program as a whole if they can go out and put up a really good result against Florida.
Yeah, for Miami, second of, 4 games if you count Bethune Cookman playing teams within the state of Florida, but three if you go to FBS opponents. Yeah, Florida this week, a bye week, then Florida State. This is where they make their statement within the state of Florida. But Liam, anything else you want to talk about before we get to the close?
Yeah, I just want to run through my personal keys to the game for Miami, and I have four of them. First one being play with anger, play with that fire in your gut that Bain has been definitely channeling to on route to being the most dominant defensive player in the country. They need to continue that. They need to find some way to get that adversity going in their system and really come out blazing. And then second is stay disciplined. There must be visible improvement from Miami's 9 penalties for 69 yards last game. They got to stay organized and coordinated as a unit on both sides of the football and let Florida be the ones that are really stepping on their own foot and commit the penalties themselves. Another one is control the game. Cristobal has to be a better game manager than Billy Napier because there has been some questions that have arisen from the both of them throughout their tenures, especially Napier, who made some head-scratching moves against South Florida that really caused them to lose that game there. And then my last two are a little bit more granular. One is that the secondary must stay alert because, as we know, Beck and Lagway are going to be going shot for shot like it's a 21st birthday party. I mean, Lagway loves to air out that ball. He already has 100 pass attempts in these first 3 games, which is one of the highest in all of the FBS right now. And even if UF tries to keep it on the ground with Jaden Ball at the beginning, I do believe that Bain and company will prevail over Florida's O-line and put a stop to the run, forcing them to go back to airing it out. And then speaking more on Ruben Bain, this fits in perfectly with my last key of the game, which is that we need to win this D line versus O line matchup, which I believe is the marquee matchup of this entire football game because Miami's defensive line is one of the best in the country, and Florida's offensive line is one of the best in the country. So it'll really be one of those unstoppable force versus immovable objects type games. If Lagway can get this time in the pocket, though, if the O line does do well, there still is the question if he can even produce because he had the time last game and he still managed to put up just absolutely horrible numbers, some of the worst he's ever put up in his career. So I believe that imagine what he can do from a standpoint of being even worse if Ban and Messidor can be breathing down his neck during that game. So I think overall, if we're gonna cap it off here, I'm gonna give the score prediction and I'm gonna give it, of course, in favor of Miami. I'm gonna say they're gonna win 30-20 in a high scoring game from both sides.
Yeah, for myself, my score prediction, I'll go 38-23. I think it's going to be a high scoring game as well. It depends how DJ Lagway is effective with the football, but that's to be told on Saturday. So, well, with that, game time 7:30, Miami versus Florida at Hard Rock Stadium, televised on ABC from the University of Miami campus. You can catch College Game Day 9 to 12 right by Lakeside Patio. ACC Huddle will be on the foot green. And yeah, it's going to be a very fun weekend here in Miami. For myself, Zach Cohen, Liam Hickey with me, and we want to thank Max Bernstein as well. Thank you for listening to Team H Sportscast. We'll be back soon with another episode. Thank you all.